What's going on, guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to be discussing the role of the front leg, what it is, what athletes should be looking for to better their front leg, and what it actually is not, because this is a topic confusing a lot of athletes, even coaches, as well as to when it comes to them teaching it towards somebody else. And what we're going to dive into in this video, it's actually going to surprise you, because there's a lot more things that go into getting a better front leg than actually trying to force the pullback of it or actually getting that front leg to extend. Now, before we actually dive into that, my name is Anthony Rodriguez. I am the coach and founder of Versatile Athletics. We've trained athletes across every single level, from the high school, junior college, Division I, and the professional level. We've been helping our athletes get there with a 93% success rate and helping them increase their velocity by 3 to 5 miles an hour while helping them understand how their bodies naturally prefer to move. Now, with that said, let's get back into the video. So, the front leg, a lot of misconceptions that there is around it, and we're going to start kind of debunking some of them and then giving you guys a proper structure, at least to help you guys better a front side. Let's start off with what a front leg is and what the role of it is. The front leg is essentially a transmitter of energy. It's once you're rolling down the mound and that front leg lands, right, this is where that front leg starts to play a role to stop in momentum and then redirecting that energy up the chain through the pelvis, up into the trunk, and then the whip of the arm. And to give you guys a different analogy of it, think about it as in you're driving a car, God forbid, right? The car goes ahead and crashes against a wall, right? Now, when it crashes against a wall, the car is going to stop rolling completely. This wall is the front leg, the car is your body. It crashes, and then the person who's inside comes out flying. In that case, it's that the person is the baseball, right? So you want to think about the front leg being that solid to where once you land, everything just catapults forward and out of the hand. Now, if you had a weak front leg, to give you an example of what that looks like, think like a car just rides off into a farm full of like regular cornfields, and of course it's not going to decelerate quickly, but instead is going to decelerate slowly. The person is obviously not going to fly out the car, which in this case we're giving you the analogy of the person as the baseball, right? So again, you're just going to naturally over time decelerate and not cause that impact that's going to shoot the ball out. So that's exactly not what we want, and it's actually what a lot of athletes are doing. Now, some issues with the front leg that I commonly see is when athletes land at front foot strike, the leg either starts shifting sideways, sometimes it actually does collapse inward, other times athletes can continue moving forward, which is kind of like the cornfield stuff that I mentioned to you guys. Other issues of the front leg, which doesn't directly involve the knee or like the front leg moving, but more so of the hips. If an athlete lands and then continues to kind of like shift downward as he's throwing, that's another instability. Even also, if they don't shift downward, but they also kind of like prematurely like shift upward, right? That's a re-change of direction, and that's not what we want. We want everything to stay constantly towards the plate. Now, here are some misconceptions on the front leg. A lot of athletes and coaches really try to get the front leg to actively pull back. So then you see them in drills actively trying to get this feel. And the main problem with that feel is that when you try to incorporate that into a regular throwing motion, it's going to disrupt the whole entire chain. You want the front leg to be a byproduct of how well you're moving within the hinge, the lateral phase, how well you're loading to unloading, and how well the trunk is also unwinding from above over that front leg. Now, the natural pattern and sequences of these movements are going to naturally either pull the front leg back or leave the front leg in a stable position as you can isolate the trunk in rotation. So that's exactly the movement that you want. You do not want to go in here and try to manipulate that front leg into extending, because then imagine this, it's like the delivery, it's an ideal world, and we want it to happen one sequence after the other that happens simultaneously once you just get down the mount or once you get down the movement. Now, if you're simultaneously within that movement and all of a sudden you land and you're actively trying to do this, you're disrupting the chain by forcing something to happen before it's actually meant to happen, or by actually putting so much focus on this, you're not going to allow the rest of the chain to unwind properly. We definitely don't want that. So let's actually stop trying to get that front leg to to be in that extended position because it's going to disrupt everything else. Now that leads me into the next misconception, which is that the front leg needs to have this straightened component of it. And Justin Verlander is widely used as a great example of what a front leg should look like. That's not what a front leg should look like, okay? Not ideally for everybody. Does he have an exceptional front leg? Yeah, absolutely. He's also hypermobile, and he's also a different type of athlete that's a freak of nature to some extent. So the front leg, in terms of extension and stability, is not a one-size-fits-all. We can actually sit here and go through Hall of Famers, other high velocity throwers that do not get front leg extension. For example, we can look at Josiah Gray. Actually, when he throws, his front leg stays bent as his trunk is finishing out the movement, right? So the front leg looks very, very different across the spectrum. You can either hyperextend it, it could stay flexed, or it could stay somewhere in between. So long as the front leg isn't moving side to side, forward, up, or dipping down, it is a stable front leg. Now, in other misconceptions on the front leg is I've seen coaches actually try to teach the front leg as just rotation of the hips or proper unloading of the hips. Now that is like half true, right? Because then that leads to an even worse problem on the front leg. When we try to over rotate the hips to get this front leg to pull back, what that does is that we actually create an unstable hip, and it causes us to rotate together with the trunk. So imagine if at front foot strike, right, you're here and you're trying to, well, ideally, like, you know, at front foot strike, your hips are going to be semi 45 degrees open. And then you're thinking about, okay, now I got to rotate the hips over so I can get this front leg to pull back. Now you're creating that stability here with thinking this, and it's, again, like I mentioned, it's going to cause both the hips and the shoulders to both rotate together, which is, again, going to leak out energy and not be the most efficient. Because now, yeah, did you successfully maybe get the front leg to kind of like pull back? You might have had, but you also just leaked a bunch of energy here from the pelvis up into the trunk. So we definitely don't want that. Instead, what we want is once that front foot lands here, our pelvis is in a very stable position to isolate the trunk to be able to then rotate from above, or whether it's on a side angle, over that front leg. But we definitely don't want that hip to continue rotating to get the front leg to pull back. It's more of a trunk action, and for this we can actually dive a lot deeper into like Affi's muscle synergies, which I already have a video on YouTube, which you can actually find somewhere up here. But ideally our fascia is going to be connecting fully, which in this instance, right, we're gonna have the hamstring semi-extended, we're gonna have the quad also helping into that eccentric loading, then we're gonna have the glutes stabilizing while the core or the obliques and hamstrings are also assisting into that acceleration component, right? So there's a bunch of muscles here working together at once. There is not like, you know, the pelvis is just gonna get it there. No, it's, we want to make sure that the upper half is also communicating very well with the lower half as that rotation finishes out through. All right, so now that we've covered the common misconceptions with the front leg and what a good front leg should look like regardless of extending or staying flexed, only thing we want on the front leg is for the knee not to move side to side, not to move forward, not to dip down, and not to rise up, at least, right? And then also ideally we're trying to look for something similar here with the hips, for the hips to just stay back and just allow the trunk to rotate over. So we've already discussed those misconceptions. Now let's actually talk about how we can actually create a stable front leg. Now the first thing that we want to start off with is we want stable hips, right? That is number one, because if your hips aren't stable, then we're going to get a lot of those things that I mentioned earlier with side to side rotation, maybe some of that downward dipping, or maybe some of that forward dipping, right? So ideally just general strengthening for this would actually work, right? If we want to work into layers, and things like reverse lunges, one leg glute bridges, RDLs, using mini bands to work on those external rotators like the outer glutes, etc., or glute maximus, glute medius, those muscles would already be good in itself to keep the pelvis stable. Now we also want to work on our adductors and abductors. That way we're creating that instability, obviously, on the inner part of of the thigh and just all over, all around, because we don't want any leakage of energy anywhere. Now, we also want to have great trunk movement integrated with the pelvis itself, right? So you guys are noticing here how we're going off in different layers. It's not just about focusing on the front leg. We want to focus up on the whole entire system and how this entire thing works. So main thing that I want that I would like to kind of start off to start integrating the upper half and the lower half is we can start on split stands, medicine ball, slams. We can do single leg med ball wall throws. Again, all of these things are integrating the trunk to be able to either rotate from above, keep the pelvis stable, and then just continue that rotation as that front leg is in a stable position. Now, if we want to get a little bit more advanced into loading aspect, we can do some walking lunges with T-spine rotation. We can actually also start loading these things up with a cable. So going into a split stance, high to low cable rotation, maybe low to high cable rotation. Again, integrating the trunk movement in a stable hip position is going to be very, very important for this. Now, of course, this is not the only piece that you can do or have within the gym. We also want to make sure that we're targeting the mobility, and hamstring and quad mobility is also going to be very important for this, as well as hip internal and external rotation as well. So we do actually have a video on how we actually make our corrective systems. That way you're not just going and lengthening the tissue without reintegrating it and making it stable for you to actually use and have that transfer on the mount. So I have this video clipped up somewhere here on the video where you guys can go ahead and see it as well. Now, this is going to be some bonus and probably something that you guys are never expecting, but the ankles can also affect how your front leg behaves. And one of the main two common things that I've seen with the athletes that I've trained is athletes who have pigeon toes. So what that kind of is kind of like an inward position of the feet relatively to how the patella or kind of like the tibia is placed, right? So we have the tibia, or like kind of like the foot place here, and then in pigeon toes would kind of like be placed a little bit more in this inward position. And this can affect athletes because as they're finishing rotation, they'll tend to kind of like get this little hop, right, to get them to finish the throw and obviously not just continue collapsing onto that ankle position. So there's a lot of things that we've done with some of our athletes who are actually dealing with that, like exposing that part of their body to more external rotator strengthening, actually strengthening the ankles themselves as well, just to be semi-placed in a better position. Now, oftentimes this is more of an anatomical restriction, so there's only so much that you can really do besides just try to overcompensate elsewhere within the body. Now, flat feet are also going to be something else that's going to affect the front leg. And what flat feet will cause some athletes to do is that when they go ahead and land, since they, the flat footed doesn't really have much of a base, they're sometimes either going to land a little bit more internally, and then that's going to cause for them to continue to rotate as they're releasing the pitch, and obviously that's going to create that front leg instability. So for athletes like that, we've actually given them strengthening exercises for the base of the feet to semi-support somewhat of an arch here, to try to eliminate as much pattern inefficiencies as we can with the front side. We've also gone as far as recommending them different types of insoles that will work great for them. Like as an overall, ankle mobility, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, these are also different mobilities or aspects of the ankle that are going to affect the front leg into extension, which we can definitely cover in a different video here. Now, that's kind of all that I have for you guys. Obviously, for us to help our athletes with all of these different components of the front leg, we run them through movement assessments. That way we get the right answers right away, and we're not trying to mix and match with a bunch of these different things. We're giving them exactly what they need right off the bat so that we can move the needle forward for them a lot quicker. Now, one more thing also that we heavily focus on all of our athletes is motor preference, and this is something that's not spoken to with the front leg as well. So the front leg is not necessarily like once you land, full feet planted, use a full foot, like that may definitely work, but sometimes what we've noticed with some of our athletes is incentivizing them, depending on what their motor preferences are, to either feel like they're throwing behind the balls of the foot on the front leg, or feel like they're throwing behind the heels on the front leg. Now, their stride capacity is also going to matter greatly, because if you're overstriding, now we're going to have to deal with a lot of these other hip issues. Or if you're short striding, you're also going to deal with kind of like overthrowing or rising of the hips that I spoke about earlier. So we use their motor preferences to kind of unlock a lot of these different aspects, and then give them exactly what they need to make sure that the front leg can work its magic in a way that they're not trying to like overdo it, and it's easy for them to do. So again, guys, that's all that I really have for you guys today. Hopefully, if you can go ahead and try this out, you can fix your front leg as well. Now, again, there are no claims for this video. We do work on every single strategy that I mentioned here with our athletes, but that is after assessments and understanding exactly what they need. So again, with that said, you know, there is no guarantee that you can actually fix your front leg without a prior assessment. If you do, then by all means, that's great. But if this sounds like a lot of information, you want to know how to actually get all your information and then just get the PDFs and actually just take action on it, feel free to book a call with us down below in the description. Hope this stuff helps you guys, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.